We did it. We did it. We did it. Yeah, we teamed up. We did it. Zoran Mamdani won the primary for Democratic nominee for New York City mayor. This is huge. This is massive. This is so big that I am literally at my cousin's wedding in Italy. I'm going to a dinner in a little bit, but I saw this news. I said, clear my schedule. We must get an iPhone video in the chamber. My husband is at the pool. He has been instructed not to come back to this hotel until I'm done because we have shit to talk about. Because for the first time in maybe as long as I can remember, I have a reason to make an iPhone video that isn't incredibly depressing economic news. Also, I must shout out my cousin for hosting a very financially considerate wedding for all of his guests. He is not carrying on the tradition of imposing financial ruin on his loved ones via exorbitantly priced destination weddings. Truly cut from the same cloth indeed. Shout out to my cousin, blood of my blood. Anyway, back to the point. We finally have a good reason to make one of these videos and just share in what an exciting moment this is, what this means, what this says for the future, why it matters, all of that, and just not have to talk about really depressing shit, which has really been at the top of the docket for quite some time now. And of course, bad things are still happening. There's plenty of negative stuff we could be coming on here and talking about politically, economically, and otherwise. Although we have had some highlights in the past few weeks. We did notably, for example, get to see Elon Musk and Trump rip each other's extensions out, Real Housewives style. I know Musk has tried to walk it back, deleted those tweets. We all saw it, babe. We saw it. And as people said, during Pride Month, no less, you hate to see it. Point being, though, Zoran won. And I want to talk about why this is so incredible and so emotional for New Yorkers, but I think should be emotional for the entire left progressive agenda throughout the United States, because man, did we need a win. We desperately needed a win, and we got a big one. So first and foremost, let's talk about it. If you're not aware, we just held our primary for the Democratic nominee for mayor in New York City. Generally speaking, in New York, whoever wins this primary generally goes on to win mayor. So there is every reason to think that Zoran is poised to become mayor. And this is incredibly significant for a few reasons. So this is a man who is very openly a democratic socialist and has probably the most progressive economic agenda that we have seen. I mean, by leaps and bounds on this level in New York City, at this sort of level of governance. And not only was he pushing a left economic agenda that goes even further to the left of people than like AOC or Bernie Sanders, although they both endorsed him a little later than I would have liked to see, but we got it in at the last minute. Even though his focus throughout his campaign was on this economic agenda, really focusing on the working and middle classes, taking New York City back from the corporate interests, from the billionaires, the developers, all of these sort of private enterprises that have been really draining the city and making it unlivable for the majority of our citizens. He also threw none of the other elements of his agenda under the bus in order to be more palatable for the average voter. For example, he did not throw our trans brothers and sisters under the bus or get engaged in nonsense culture wars that the right is always trying to drag the left into in order to distract from the real important economic issues. Didn't do that. He was notably the candidate up on that debate stage who refused to even entertain the ridiculous question of whether or not he has the agenda of visiting Israel in the first few months of his tenure as mayor of New York City. Like, we're truly in bizarro world. Like, could you even imagine someone getting up there and being like, when are you planning to visit Belgium? Like, as mayor of New York City, wouldn't even engage in that, did not throw Gaza under the bus, did not throw his ardent support of Palestinian rights and sovereignty and humanity under the bus in order to get his economic agenda across. Also on that note, literally a Muslim named Zoran Mamdani, and we have a tendency in politics to think that in order to win, especially on the left, a politician needs to look a certain way or appeal to average Americans, which just means white man. It just means white man. And what have we learned here is that no, it doesn't. That's actually not necessary to get across this economic agenda because, and I genuinely believe that we all need to believe this in order to move forward in any way, the average person is a little bit smarter than that and a little bit savvier than that. And if they actually support the agenda, they're going to support the candidate. You don't have to, like, do I think Gavin Newsom is hot? Of course, I have eyes. Do I think he's like the automatic choice for who we should be running for president? Probably not. He's not even all that popular in his own state, but he looks presidential. And he has that sort of presidential aura, which we all know what that's code for. So the fact that Zoran won, being who he is, being where he is from, with his agenda, with nothing thrown under the bus, sends so many messages to the Democratic establishment, who is always telling not just their candidates, but their voters that they need to dream smaller, that they need to accept that only a certain type of candidate is going to win, that you have to downplay things like foreign policy or gender rights or whatever the case may be in order to get through your economic agenda. And even that has to be severely watered down. It's poetry. It's poetry that this candidate won. It's also important to talk about where he came from and who he was running against. So for those who didn't know, Andrew Cuomo, disgraced former governor of New York, who, among many other things, had to leave office because over a dozen women were credibly accusing him of sexual assault, was drummed out of political life. Basically, every publication in New York and nationally was, treating him like a bunch of wine grapes and just stomping the shit out of him for months on end until he left political life in disgrace. But then he crawled out of the self-imposed exile in whatever swamp he was living in, crawled out of that to enter the mayoral race, mostly to thwart progressives. And of course, because he's not only got enormous name recognition, which especially on more local politics is, half the game essentially, if not more so, started with an enormous lead, got, of course, all of your billionaire backers, your institutional Democratic support. Of course, the Clintons had to throw in for him. You had companies like DoorDash, you had landlords, you had humongous big money donations piling into the Cuomo campaign. And on the other side, you had Zoran, whose campaign was essentially entirely comprised of small money donations, independent supporters, volunteers like myself. I was literally going door to door, knocking people's doors for Zoran, as were many others. And by the way, this is the first time I've ever canvassed for a candidate and they actually won, which is a joy I can't even tell you. But I was doing that several times, got people, getting in my face a little bit about it. And here's one thing I will say. If you are invested in politics, progressive politics in particular, and you are, a bit of a Karen-coded woman like me, let's be real, I'm a 36-year-old affluent white woman with a bob haircut, often wearing business casual. We need you canvassing. We need you canvassing because let me tell you, sometimes you will it is your constitutional right to canvass for a political cause. Let's be very clear about that. But sometimes, especially depending on what neighborhood you're in, you'll go toe-to-toe with a neighbor who is getting all in your face, threatening to call this and that and saying you have to get out of the building and blah, 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 blah. Here's what I say to those people. You want to call the manager on me? I'll call the Constitution on you, babe. We can go toe-to-toe, Bob to Bob. I'm here. I have a right to be here. You want me to take you off the voter list? Happy to do it. But you're not going to intimidate me. You simply won't. So, and also it's very easy for people who have a certain amount of privilege to move very freely through all different spaces, including just getting right on past doormen. So if you've ever thought about canvassing and you have a certain amount of privilege, please do it because these causes need you. But anyway, the campaign was comprised of these volunteers, of just average New Yorkers, and so many, like when I look at my friends, my colleagues, people I follow on social media, strangers on the street, like I was literally out canvassing one day and then my door got canvassed at the exact same time and my husband was like, my wife is out there doing the thing, I can't vote, but if I could, blah, 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 blah. Like New Yorkers came together. And in such little tiny ways, like the Bernie Sanders for President campaign, that all came together to build up to something much bigger, much better. And Andrew Cuomo, who, stepped into this race thinking that it was a done deal from minute one, that he wouldn't even really have to campaign. And he really didn't, not on a grassroots level, just to be humiliated. You did all that for nothing. You had to stand up on that debate stage and speak with such condescension to all of the other candidates, but especially to Zoran. You had to have him turn around and say, I may never have done X or Y, but I've also never had to resign in disgrace. I've never been credibly accused of sexual assault by X many women. You had to do all of that, make national news with it. Once again, humiliate and degrade yourself for nothing. You lost. And all of the money and institutional support in the world couldn't buy you something better. That's beautiful. Anyone else could have won this race, honestly, and I would have been happy with that outcome just to see Andrew Cuomo suffer as a New Yorker and as a woman. So that was a delight. But as I said, his progressive agenda is such a reason to feel hopeful about the future of this country and what the voters of this country are actually interested in and what they are willing to vote for if given a good choice. Speaking of choice, it's also very important to remember that here in New York City, we have ranked choice voting, which gives a lot better options as far as a diversity of candidates, even within the same party, because you don't have the spoiler effect of you can only vote for one person. So if you go, for a more progressive candidate, you are basically handing it to the Republican because it's only going to be one of two. It's It's not like that. You rank choice your preferences. So if your first pick doesn't get enough votes to move forward, it rolls over to your second, and so on and so forth. It's a great system. We need it more throughout the country, because without it, candidates who are progressive like this, who come from behind like this, would have way less of a chance, and way more voters would be really scared into voting for what feels like their only institutional option. We also have a bigger diversity of parties. You know, Zoran is part of the Working Families Party, which I actually canvass for every time there's an election day. I go out to remind New Yorkers at my polling station, you can vote for the Democratic candidate for these big national races, but if you do so on the Working Families ballot instead of the Democratic ballot, vote goes to the same place, but it really helps these smaller parties help to build. Worth noting, Working Families Party last night in New York swept. People want a progressive economic agenda, and they don't need to be talked down to, and it doesn't need to be sold to them only by people who look and sound like Bernie Sanders, and you don't have to throw all of the other progressive social justice related causes under the bus in order to deliver that message. The playbook has changed, and in my opinion, for the vastly better. And I also want to say something, you know, a little bit more just like philosophical, because we're flying high in New York. We're feeling good. This is a massive win. And it's a win for, you know, the hundreds, thousands of people who are going to sort of come from nowhere, but really hold true to their economic values the way this candidate did, who we have yet to know their names. There are already some who are running currently around the country, but many, many more will come forward with a victory like this. Also, this is a tiny fun fact, but Zoran is from the neighborhood I live in, and one time I canvassed with his mom. Delightful. She's a famous director, Mississippi Masala. Check it out. Anyway. So there was a little bit of an advantage. People are accusing him of Nepo baby. Is he really? I don't know, but he's using his powers for good. What are other Nepo babies doing? Being like the second worst actress on the Gilded Age? Like, I truly, like, if all Nepo babies could run for political office on a left agenda, I would support it all day and night. You know, I know Elon Musk is estranged from 13 or 14 of his kids. Can some of them throw their hat in the ring for the progressive agenda? We'd love to see it. But anyway, to me, the most important thing about this, aside from watching the delicious crash outs that are happening everywhere from like institutional Democrats to the far right now, love to see those crash outs. The thing that I think is most important, and that I'm really kind of taking forward with this, don't let them make you concede before it's over. Not for candidates, well, also for candidates, but for us as voters and as citizens. So much of the power of politics is about making people feel like things are already a foregone conclusion, like the outcome is already determined and you're not going to be able to impact it. Cuomo entered this race. It was a complete foregone conclusion by anyone who knows their stuff that he was going to win. He was the only one who had citywide name recognition. That alone will usually put people over the edge. And if we listen to it, if we took in this message that it's the money that will decide who wins, it's the institutional support, you know, you can't make too much change at once, you can't have too progressive of an agenda, you can't look or act or talk or be a certain way, don't let them get you to give up before you've even started. You know, I think about all of the videos that I've done in this little iPhone series, and so many of them are just these demoralizing moments that feel like a failure. And like, I bawled my eyes out in 2016 and 2020 when Bernie lost, like, and it felt even more sort of bitter and enraging because I knew that it was really his own party that was sabotaging him in a lot of ways, because I truly believe in my core that for a lot of institutional Democrats, especially at the national level, they would prefer a Donald Trump to a Bernie Sanders, period, end of story, because it would be much less disruptive to their corporate agenda. Which, to be clear, I do think we underestimate just how much both the left and the right in America is completely sold out to corporate interests for the most part. Yes, there are still differences. Yes, the right is still worse on many issues. But the point is, a lot of the quote unquote Democrats that are elected to represent us, especially at these high levels, there is nothing progressive or left about their actual agenda. But I felt that demoralization. I felt the demoralization throughout a lot of what's been happening since November of last year. Sometimes I just feel like I have to give myself a little treat by not even reading the news, by not even opening my computer, because it feels like only really depressing things are going to wait for me there. It's not just about feeling sad in the moment. It's about how it takes our energy away, how it makes us feel like there's no point in trying because the powers that be have already won and will continue to win. Like, that is the sort of poison that it puts into our brains and into our hearts. I feel it all the time. But I'll tell you, A, they're wrong. People can win. Good ideas can win. Americans are not crazy and they're not stupid for the most part. Some of them are, but not all of them. And a lot of them want to live a dignified life like any other developed country. We have so much wealth in this country and we spend it in the worst ways and on the worst things. And we refuse to tax the wealthy appropriately. And we refuse to invest in our own people, in our infrastructure, in our health, in any of these things that would improve our quality of life for as hard as we work and as much as we produce as a country. We do want a better life. And a lot of the things that Zoran's proposing that are appealing to New Yorkers, things like buses that work more efficiently and are free to ride, making housing more affordable for the average person who has to live and work in the city, rather than turning everything over to billionaire developers and landlords who are just going to sell it to the highest bidder. Those things are appealing to people all over the country. It's not just New Yorkers who want things like that. It's not just New Yorkers who are tired of the corporate agenda, who are tired of our lives being sold out to private interests. People around the country want these things. And someone like Zoran can run and win everywhere. But we have to believe it's possible. We have to. And I tell you, as depressing as the past several months have been for me in some ways, never have I felt better than when I was just out there knocking doors. Even when some of those doorman building bitches were trying to get in my face about it. We won, sis. I know you didn't vote for him, but we won. Anyway, nothing felt better than those moments. Because I felt like I was doing something, because I felt like I was believing enough in a better outcome to actually get out there, to meet my neighbors, to shake hands, to pass out flyers. And you know what? Even the people who were doing that for other candidates, I still think that was wonderful. Unless you were doing it for Cuomo, in which case, stand up. Have some dignity. But honestly, no, I'll be honest. Even if you're doing it for a candidate I really don't agree with, at least you're doing it. At least you're getting out there, And I love the fact that toward the end of the race, the top two non-Cuomo candidates cross-endorsed each other and said, vote for either of us. It's fine. We're happy with either outcome. Just don't vote for this other person. That they united, that they maximized their joint sleigh, if you will. Like that, even in and of itself, was a beautiful thing that we don't see nearly enough in politics, is that we agree on enough to not tear each other apart and possibly hurt the cause in the process. Please believe something is better for all of America, but especially wherever you live, your state, your city, your neighborhood. Yes, things can be really scary at the very top right now, and they are, but a lot of really good things are happening. And I really hope that what happened in New York last night is going to motivate so many people and make them feel hopeful, because we deserve it. I really do believe Americans are at their core, most not all, are good, smart, hardworking, kind people who deserve a better life, and through so many different factors, lack of education being a primary one, our incredibly individualist, hyper-competitive society being another, but have really been turned against each other, but turned against themselves. And it doesn't have to be that way. It is not a foregone conclusion. Things can get better, and they will. What happened in New York can happen anywhere. It's such an exciting day. I love you guys.